Welcome to the Stronger for Business podcast with Dyfrig, Jenkins, Pete Rushmer, and myself, Bev Thorogood. Stronger for Business is a training consortium dedicated to bringing high-quality training solutions to businesses through the combined expertise of our partners. From skills training to developing personal and professional excellence, our mission is to help business owners get the very best from their people at all levels, from boardroom to shop floor. The Stronger for Business podcast is our opportunity to share our knowledge, thoughts and ideas with you, the listener. You'll get to meet some awesome guests from across the business world, sharing their experience of learning and development. If you love what we have to say, make sure you hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you use to consume your podcasts so you don't miss out on future episodes. We'd love to hear from you with your suggestions for discussion topics or ideas for future guests. And if you really love what you hear, please do consider leaving us a 5-star review, as this helps to get the podcast out to a wider audience. Sit back and enjoy the Stronger for Business podcast. So welcome to episode 2 of the S4B podcast. I don't know where that time has gone. So episode 1 was all about introducing us. This is episode 2. We get into the real good stuff from now on. So I'm sat here again with my 2 co-presenters. We've got Dyfrig there and Pete. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing?
You can tell who's who because Pete's got the English accent and you've got the Welsh accent. So if you're listening to this rather than watching it, mine's fairly straightforward. You can pick up the high-pitched Geordie, but just so you know who the 2 guys are. So we're going to be talking about collaboration, aren't we?
It's very exciting. Looking forward to today's topic.
Yeah, brilliant. Before we get going then, let's have a bit of a review. What have you been up to this last week? Pete, tell me what you've been up to.
Well, Friday, we took full advantage of the Zoom situation at the moment and being in isolation. And I managed to successfully complete a quiz for our family who range from all over the UK, but also into Dubai as well. We'd actually had to rain check it literally from the week before because we'd got 2 rounds into a 10-round quiz and my daughter spilt a pint of water over my laptop. Oh. and it was quite stressful. It was really quite stressful, but we were able to make sure this Friday there were no cables around. There was nothing for her to trip on. We made sure we did a full hazard awareness and, there was a full assessment in place. So, yeah, we managed to overcome that. So, yeah, super, super happy to have done that. And it was quite good fun, actually. And then sort of in other news, I'm really, really pleased that I set a goal a few weeks ago to cut down my 10-kilometre run time by 10%. And I did a run 2 or 3 weeks ago for 10K, and I really, really struggled. It took me 75 minutes. And on Sunday, I did another 10K at 63 minutes. And by my reckoning, that's slightly more than 10%. So I was super happy with that.
It's fantastic. Do you know, isn't that really motivating, though, when you can see those changes happening?
Yeah, and it just felt really good, actually. It felt really good, and I paced myself well, and I had a strong finish. So I was really, really pleased with it, and it made a big difference. When I've trained running previously, I've often just set a goal to finish and just to complete the distance rather than to set a time. But I've become much more goal orientated as a person from a professional development point of view, setting goals for everything. And the reward actually having that target and having something to aim at from a time point of view makes a big difference from how rewarding it is, but also how that pushed me on and made me perform better. So yeah, interesting topic maybe for another day.
Absolutely. Goal setting. I can't beat it. Brilliant. Oh, well done. Well, that's brilliant. I managed to get out for a 4-mile walk on Saturday, and then on Sunday I went out for a 4-mile run walk because my running is way out the window. Do you know, it was only 2011 I did the Great North Run. and loved it. I've done a couple of half marathons, never managed a full marathon. And it's only probably 2 years ago that I was quite comfortably running 4 or 5 miles. And now I really struggle to walk 4 miles, let alone running.
Yeah.
But I was quite chuffed that I even got a bit of running in. And it was hot as well on Saturday.
Yeah, really hot. It's been a lovely weekend. But it's running is one of those really challenging things where it takes a long time to build up and then very little time just to deteriorate the ability. Yeah, absolutely. You've got to stay in with it.
Yeah, it doesn't help because my husband's a runner. He ran for the RAF, he's run all his life. He ran competitively. Yeah. So whereas I run probably around about 10 to 11 minute miles, he's like, even at 57, he's still like 6 minutes, 7 minute miling. And at his best, he was like 5.5 minute miles. I think, oh my God, it's not fair, is it? It's not something we could have ever done together because he was too quick. What about you, Dov? What have you been up to this week?
Well, I had a similar goal to Pete, actually, where you wanted to cut his run time down. I did that. So for a couple of weeks before, I was running 3K. I cut that down to 0. I didn't do any running at all because I've never been a runner. If I go to the gym, I run on the treadmill. But road running it's really different, isn't it? Because you haven't got the give and the treadmill and lots of other excuses. So I did that. But I did do Joe Wicks every morning last week. So at 8 o'clock every morning before I started work, my wife and I, we did Joe Wicks for the 20 minutes hit. And God, that was hard work. It's good, but it's good, because like Pete and yourself said, you need a goal. You need somebody you need to be self-motivated, but you need somebody else to push you as well. So that was good, and I felt a lot better for it. My recovery time was better than I thought it was going to be. It's like everything that you have to learn, isn't it? You just it's never ezy, and you have to push yourself. Yeah, so we did that. We took a day off today because it's my daughter's birthday today. So there's no homeschooling today and no Joe Wicks, but normal service resumes tomorrow. So out and about. Went on a 15-20 mile bike ride yesterday as well. So yes, enjoying the sunshine because I think the weather's going to change from tomorrow, I think. So make the most of it. Like everything in life, make the most of it while you can.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I feel quite privileged that you're here with us recording the podcast when it's your daughter's birthday.
She really doesn't mind.
Well, the height of my day so far has been that our freezer, the freezer actually, we've got a separate freezer, has decided it's not going to play properly, so it's tripped the electricity out 3 times today. So bearing in mind that I'm hosting the Zoom meeting here, if I suddenly disappear, it will blame it on the freezer.
I actually thought it was about to happen then. Your internet must have just popped then, and it went like that just for a second, and I thought it was going.
What was that? What on earth was that noise?
There's a siren somewhere. I thought it was something.
I heard a siren, but it's not near me. I live in Hampton, don't you know?
Zero crime.
Well,
it
must have been an online siren because we all heard it.
Yeah, it's not in my house.
We're miles apart.
Wow,
how bizarre.
Well, that is weird.
Police coming to get one of us.
Anyway, let's get back to the podcast. That was bizarre. We might not edit that out. We might just leave that in.
Exciting stuff.
Let's chat about collaboration then, because that's what we're doing. But I think it might be good to talk about the benefits of collaboration in learning, and also the benefits of collaboration for business. So let's go. Let's talk.
So I'll just kick it off with a collaboration in learning. So quite recently, I personally experienced, just a little while since I went on sort of any training per se myself, with a group of individuals. I've done quite a bit online, and I've done a lot of personal stuff. However, I've recently joined a book club. And wow, the collaborative learning out of a book club, absolutely incredible. It's made such a difference. We're reading various professional development books. This month was You Ask, They Answer. And as a group, we then review them after everyone's read, and the different perspectives and points of view on a book alone, and the different interpretations and the different meanings, it's really, really expanded my mind and really, really opened up my thoughts to the benefits of collaborative learning.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? As a trainer, there's the stand at the front and the talk and chalk. You lecture almost to people, and when you're delivering, sort of teaching, I don't even call that training, but when you're delivering information in that sort of chalk and talk style, it really is just a one-way process, isn't it?
It's dull. It's awful.
It is dull.
Yeah.
But you're teaching, but you have absolutely no understanding or no way of knowing if that learning is actually being received. Because, of course, I can go in and teach, but I can't force somebody to learn.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge difference. So for me, from a training point of view, I do a lot of group work. I do a lot of posing questions and getting the group to answer the question, because unlike your GCSEs or O levels as it was in my day, don't laugh either of you.
No, I had them too.
Did you? I thought I was the last of the O levels.
I'm clearly the baby then.
You are.
Only just.
Don't behave. But yeah, unlike sort of that kind of academic learning where you're learning facts and you're learning figures, or you're just learning knowledge, that to me isn't that's just information storage. It's not learning. I've got a friend who I would say he's a pretty smart guy. He's got a couple of master's degrees. He's got about 3 or 4 bachelor degrees. Learning is his thing, but he can't drive a car and he can't do anything practical. He cooks, but that's about the limit of his sort of practical skills. And to me, learning is about applying. And as a trainer, if I just deliver information, I have no way of knowing if the people that I'm delivering that information to are going to be able to apply any of the stuff that I've delivered. So to me, collaborative learning, when you put people into groups, or they can share their learning experiences, gives me as a trainer great feedback as to whether what I'm delivering is being absorbed and put to practical use, I suppose.
And I think for a lot of us that are or were trainers, I think you start off with the technical skills. A lot of people come into training or L&D through the technical competence, whatever that might be. You kind of asked, I think it'll be good training that. Why don't you go and give it a go? So you give it a go. And a lot of it is usually considered manuals or textbooks or processes or something like that. And then as you develop your skills and you get older and you have more experience, that turns then into more of a facilitation rather than standing at the front with PowerPoint, or before my time, of overhead projectors, all those kind of things. I'm just talking at people. And I think a lot of people, and even though life has moved on so much and technology has moved so much, there are still a lot of people out there talking at people. So it's really interesting is that you have some content, whatever that might be, whatever your discipline or your industry or whatever the topic is, and actually to pose a question and get people to talk about it in their context. And actually, as a coach as well, that using coaching skills, you can have a conversation with people, and if you pose the right question in the right way, given the context, the answers are nearly always in the room, but you're providing a framework with some theory or some research to help support that. So it's just really interesting that the collaborative learning, don't feel, as a trainer, especially if there are new trainers or people interested in training, if you're thinking about standing and talking at people for a whole day or half a day or an hour, it's really, really not going to work, because I think people's learning styles, I think we'll probably talk about that in a different podcast, that doesn't always work for people. So it's allowing the group to talk more than you do as the trainer, but as a facilitator, you're there to facilitate learning rather than to lecture at people. People have that in school, and like you said earlier, Bev, knowledge retention is so small. If you spend a whole day learning, then the chances are you're going to walk away from that day not remembering much at all. Certainly after 12 hours, 24 hours, after a month, you're not going to even remember that you went on that training course, maybe, let alone actually what you learned. So collaborative learning in a learning space, but outside that learning space, especially like Pete said, something like a book club or a virtual book club, and allowing people to have a discussion, challenge ideas, challenge thoughts. Collaborative learning is probably more effective and more sustainable and transferable as well.
Is there a space where non-collaborative learning, that more sort of lecture style learning, is appropriate, where it would be more beneficial than a more interactive way of learning?
Yeah, I think so. If you want to get some insight from an expert, I've been to some sessions in London where you go see an expert. I remember going to see something, I think it was with the London Business Forum, it was called. And the lady who was there was the HR director for the London Olympics. And she gave a presentation for an hour and a half, massively insightful. And if you can imagine going from 0 staff to literally tens of thousands of staff and games helpers at the time, just seeing the curve of 0 employees, nothing for ages. A couple of weeks before, it went up by tens of thousands, and then it dropped away again. If you want that kind of insight, lectures and things like that are really important. But you come away from that thinking, yes, that was insightful, that was helpful. Is it really going to benefit me? Probably not. But it's good to be inspired and to get a nugget of information sometimes. But you have to think about the long-term benefit, I guess, of all kinds of development.
Yeah, absolutely. So I enjoy listening to TEDx talks and various individual learning opportunities like that, where we can listen to experts speak. And I find it fascinating to watch and listen and learn from people in that way. I've got a fairly unique perspective on certainly collaborative and learning and facilitation as a training skill. So that's very much what our business is based on. So entering into initially the driver CPC training market, where it's mandatory training, the classes have to be 7 hours. 7 hours delivered training as per the EU directive, and every driver has to sit 5 in 5 years, so therefore they have to sit 35 hours worth of training. For me to come in from a facilitation background, I find that perspective on learning quite challenging, and that actually I've kind of found the best of both worlds in that sense from a mandatory training point of view, because I've sat on CPC courses myself with 300 slides over 7 hours, where it's literally death by PowerPoint. But I've been able to turn that on its head and turn that into sort of our USP around our hashtag no snore guarantee around facilitation. One of my 7 hour courses has got 13 PowerPoint slides, and it's all down to the way I've structured that day. Facilitating learning, group learning, different activities, catering, like Dyfrig earlier mentioned, around different learning styles, catering to different learning styles, and ensuring that everyone sort of gets a benefit from that training. And I loved what you were saying earlier about knowledge and power, because one of my favourite sayings is, a lot of people say knowledge is power, but knowledge is only potential power. The power is actually in the application of the knowledge, and it's so true.
It's interesting, isn't it? When you're talking about mandatory training, from a public sector background, I worked for the Air Force for a lot of years, and we had, hours of mandatory training that we had to go through on health and safety, fire safety, aircraft safety, what they called FOD, foreign object damage awareness. So there was like pounding amounts of mandatory training. But is it really learning? It's ticking a box to say that we've covered our backs to give you this information, but there's no guarantee. If you asked me about any of the mandatory training that I've had to do, could I probably tell you much of it? I don't think so. And yet I had that every year. We had this, the refresher training. So I suppose we've got to look at the objective. If the objective is just to tick a box and cover ourselves from a litigation point of view, then talk and talk, just dozens of PowerPoint slides. You've had the information, that's my back covered, but that's not learning. That is not learning. So why do we do it? Why on earth do we bother going through that process? it used to be a day out of my life that I was never going to get back every year, listening to the same old information that I'd forgotten the minute I walked out the door. Why on earth do organisations still do this?
Yeah, and it's still there now. The measurable of time and time spent in a classroom being the measurable factor. So even first aid training that we deliver, which is fantastic because it is a group activity. It's practical. People get to get off their chairs and get involved in the practical classes. But still, we are bound as trainers to achieve a 6-hour course. Now, some groups. And that presents a challenge because sometimes we might be training 12 people, in which case 6 hours may not be enough time for everyone to have a good opportunity. Whereas actually when we run smaller classes, that the time can reduce quite significantly. So then you find that you're covering additional ground. Well, those learners are getting more benefit than the bigger class learners, but ultimately we're bound by this time measurement. And I do find that interesting. It'd be fantastic to be able to sit down with the Resus Council and say, look, why are we measuring learning by time still and not learning outcomes and not, our classes still end with a multiple choice test and to demonstrate learning. And actually the pass and fail is ultimately down to the ability to complete the practical tasks, especially with first aid, particularly with first aid. So I do find it baffling that whilst learners need to pass a test and to pass practical skills, we're still bound by the timing. And actually, I wonder, is it because it's a benefit to the learner, or is it actually a way of policing training companies to ensure that they're delivering the course that they're meant to deliver, which I find quite interesting as well.
So from a corporate background, so in one of my previous roles in financial services and insurance, the induction for most people going into a contact center environment could be 3 or 4 weeks, and it's really, really intense. You've got to learn how to use the phones, the software. There's scripting or guidance, depending on which company, the language that they kind of use. There's all the FCA rules, Financial Conduct Authority. There's all the quality and compliance measures, which essentially come from the FCA, but then get interpreted into each organization. There's all the brands that they work for, the different customer types. And it's a lot of information. It's really interesting, Pete, what you're saying is, yes, there are the rules, there's the guidance and the law often, but then it's the misinterpretation of operational teams, of quality and compliance, of the training team often, to say that we have to do all of this, and we're kind of force feeding information down, and nobody's going to learn anything in 3 weeks. They might learn it for a couple of days, and they've forgotten it, and then you're on to the next thing, and then on to the next thing, and you have 3 weeks of intensive training, and then or 4 weeks, and then people come out to that and they go, I don't remember what I did on Friday, let alone 3 Fridays ago, let alone my first day, which is nearly a month ago. And then people fail so often by force feeding people and not allowing people to practice and to collaborate and talk and have discussions, which is why we're having this conversation about collaborative learning. We are setting people up to fail. And if you even go back to health and safety perspective, you can dress health and safety up as much as you want to. You can gamify e-learning and all that kind of stuff. But it is what it is. Get it done, get over it done quickly, but then make sure that people understand that and maybe have the practical opportunity to do that. So there's lots of arguments for and against blended learning, but why spend 3 hours gamifying health and safety or some kind of compliance? Get it done as quickly as possible because nobody wants to do it. They have to do it. And then do something practical where people can actually learn about lifting or where the fire escapes are or whatever it might be. So it's getting that balance, so for over if it's an 8-hour first aid training, do actually what people have to do, but then allow some give in there. I think people and organizations and legal entities can be too fixated on what people have to do and force feeding. Well, actually, we are setting people up to fail, and that can be dangerous in some respects.
Yeah,
there's that old saying, isn't there? Show me and tell me and I forget. Show me and I remember. Involve me and I understand. And surely when we get to learning, we want to get to the point of understanding, not just knowing.
Absolutely.
We've got to go that bit deeper.
I think Confucius said that probably about 3,000 years ago or something like that. We still haven't learned. So
no, I didn't hear that firsthand though.
I'm
not quite that old.
Absolutely.
So, I think there's certain times when you don't need to have collaborative learning. If you're doing direct skills training, you're showing somebody how to do something, you're showing them, they're having a go while you supervise them, and you've got that kind of skill at the end of it. You can measure whether that learning has happened because there's a product at the end of it that shows that it has, and maybe you repeat that a few dozen times until we go through the whole unconscious incompetence right through to unconscious competence stuff.
Absolutely.
But I think if we're talking about behaviour change, if we're talking about perspective change, if we're talking about a change in thinking, we can't do talk and chalk and expect to get that level of of change and transformation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If I was asked to come in and do something, to stand in front of a group of people unless it was mandatory compliance training, I probably would turn down that kind of work because it's not my style, and I don't think the organisation would be getting the value out of me, and they wouldn't get the return on investment. So as a provider, if I was asked to do that, I would have a very honest conversation with that sponsor or that company and say, I don't think this is the best approach. Can we discuss a better way? Yeah, because sometimes people don't know what they don't know. So I think it's as providers to help people get the best out of us and get the return on their investment. Yeah.
And I think there's a layering here, isn't there? So a lot of what I do is awareness training. So specifically around menopause, as you know, I go in and I talk to organisations and their employees about menopause. And a lot of the work that I do is at that awareness level. It's not necessarily looking for behaviour change. There's a lot of people, they want to make aware of the issues around menopause. But actually knowing the issues isn't necessarily going to change the way people are. But it's a starting point, and I think that's important as well. We talk about awareness. I suppose it's that whole, tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me. So the involve is the next stage after awareness, I think. One of the things that I've found is that I go in and talk to management team or managers in particular. And I will go in and I'll do an awareness session with managers, and I walk away and I think, I really wish I could follow this up with, so this is the information you've had. Now let's do a few sessions about how you can actually practically apply this. So how can you have those awkward conversations? Let's discuss that in more detail. And it's often hard to get organisations to realise that the awareness training in any topic or subject is just the first stage. It's not going to be enough to create that behaviour change in further down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way that change will happen off the back of a training course or a learning and development day. There's no way that change can happen. Change happens over time, and then we're talking about the importance of having a mentor and coaching and facilitation in the workplace and in the environment following any training to ensure that learning's been embedded. I think that's a massive importantly part. Get my words out properly. It's a massively important part of the learning process is to actually go back into the workplace and to ensure that you have a mentor, because that's absolutely the way that change occurs and behavioural change happens.
Yeah, I think sometimes though it's hard to get that. There's a lot of beeping going on in the background. I think sometimes it's hard to get that across to businesses, especially when they're investing money in this. They want to hit as great a number of people as they can at the lowest cost, which is makes sense. But if you're paying lip service to the process, you're kind of wasting your money if there's no follow up.
Well, I try to encourage through so if it is a program, what I try always to do is to make sure that there is, like Pete said, a mentor. So somebody to hold learners, individuals. So that could be the line manager. So a line manager could have one person or several people on a program from their team, on their teams. So it's making sure that the line manager or the sponsors are fully aware, sometimes in advance, of what's going on, so that they understand they can support and challenge their people. But also as well, having peers being able to support and challenge each other as well, especially, you know, if an organization doesn't really know much about or doesn't implement coaching or mentoring as well. So if you start saying, maybe I want you to coach somebody, I want you to mentor somebody, thinking, oh God, there's something else I need to learn about as well. So it's just making sure that people are supporting and challenging each other between the sessions. You know, so if there's one session a month, making sure that people are being held to account, for the want of a better word, because we're all grown-ups, to make sure that that collaboration and that learning stays alive for the 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, whatever it might be between sessions as well. And it's really interesting that when you have the conversations, when you meet up with people, it's go, oh yeah, we had a conversation about this, and we've been talking to each other naturally, because and the collaboration sometimes happens between sites. Oh, yeah. And then you get lots of additional learning, not just about the topic that you learned, but learning about each other and each other's departments and each other's sites and all the cultural nuances and stuff going as well. So collaborative learning, particularly from a management and leadership perspective, has so many additional benefits, not only what you talk about as a topic on a particular day or half day. Yeah.
One thing that I sort of picked up on that I wanted to sort of address as well is that, yes, having your manager's involvement in the learning process is about holding the learner to account, but it's also about recognizing the value that you place in that member of staff or that colleague, so that there's a value in them putting in the time. Let's face it, learning something new takes effort. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes commitment. So if there's a detachment between the student and the manager, then there's potentially a feeling of, I'm in this on my own. Why am I putting all this effort in and it's not even being recognised? So I think it is about holding the learner to account, but it's also about showing the value that you place in that employee and through the support that you're giving them to develop. And I think that's often missed. Let's look, if we can, at the broader value of collaboration. Now, obviously, as a consortium, collaboration is at the heart of what we do. So let's talk about some of the benefits of collaborating, not within an organisation, because obviously we've brought 3 separate organisations together. It might not necessarily be that there's 3 external agencies coming together. It could be collaboration between different departments, between different teams. What are the benefits?
Can you hear homeschool in the background?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least that's demonstration that homeschool's happening in our household, okay? So going back to your point regarding collaboration within an organisation, I've certainly found in my previous life in corporate businesses that there is a real challenge around silos and breaking silos down, particularly in pretty much every business that I've worked in and every type of business. There's always been a challenge between departments, and there's been some friction. And interestingly, certainly in a privately owned business, the business owner had put in place bonus schemes that almost caused friction as well between departments, and that lack of collaboration was quite damaging. And I think the bonus scheme had been done inadvertently because he'd looked at each function individually, and he'd looked at that function and thought, how can I get this function working most productively, most proactively, and most profitably, but hadn't considered the impact for the overall business from that function. And therefore that had created this sort of friction, and that's interesting. And actually businesses need to take a much more holistic approach across departments so that they can work out a great way for them all to collaborate.
Yeah, I think performance bonuses do that, as do key performance indicators. Sometimes the KPIs in each different department actually create priorities that conflict and create conflict in the wider organisation. Okay, Dev, any thoughts?
Yeah, Yeah, I agree with everything that you guys have just said. And it's really interesting when you talk about collaboration, you think, and it sounds like such a nice thing to have. And I hate to use the word nice. We should all collaborate. It's, as one of my old line managers says, it's common sense, but it's never common practice. And, if you go to a medium-sized business or, a large size or, a multinational corporate, I've seen it and experienced it as well, where everything from the organizational design, if you like, completely goes against the overall strategy of the business. And you look at it thinking, this just does not make any sense. You get an overall business strategy, you get all the goals, all the things that follow to that. And then somebody, and the intention is right, but the application of it is completely wrong. You get 5 different business areas, whatever they might be, you give them the KPIs and the targets, and they actively then work against each other. So it's really interesting that just by the structure and the design of the organization, it works counter to collaboration. So therefore, communication falls apart. And then, like Pete says, people are competing rather than collaborating. Silos are then formed, and then those silos don't actually exist unless you're on a farm. So, and then all of a sudden, all these walls go up between people, and then there's mistrust. Then teamwork falls apart, and all of a sudden, you have a very dysfunctional organization rather than something that actually, why are we competing when we should be collaborating? Because everything that we do in an organization, no matter how big or small it is, should be there to deliver the overall business strategy and the objectives, and work within hopefully a common set of values as well. It's really interesting that human nature works against what we should be doing often.
And yet, as humans, we are naturally collaborative. We want to work together. We prefer interdependency to independence, really. Certainly,
it just doesn't make sense, does it?
It doesn't. I suppose if you're looking at businesses and organisations as metaphorically like a machine, as we have done in for many years, we're looking at different functions having specific roles. So if something isn't working properly, you assume that one element of that machine must be broken. Whereas I don't know that the complexity of business really fits that metaphor very well. I think the idea of businesses being more organic, of being more of an ecosystem where, if something isn't working, it's possibly just that, we need to look at the organisation as a whole and see where those different parts are working together and supporting each other from a more sort of ecological point of view, if you like.
So it's really funny you should say that, because I honestly haven't prepped this already. This book, Peter's talking about book clubs earlier, and I'm not in a book club, but people share, have you read this book? So this is called Black Box Thinking, and I think a lot of people might have read this already. Yeah,
I've not read it. I've heard of it, not read it.
I recommend it to you. Yeah, so this is really cool. And it's really interesting that often because of mistrust and silos and blame and things like that, there's usually something wrong with one department or one person is doing their job. There's an example in there of a lean process in a car manufacturer. And if anybody knows anything about lean processes and car manufacturers, they probably know who it is. Now, something that is wrong with the process and on the shop floor, on the production line, and something isn't wrong. So a door isn't fitting properly, or a component part isn't right. The whole thing gets shut down, and all the senior managers come together and say, what can we learn from this? What's gone wrong? Because it's not one person, one department's fault. It's probably everybody's had something to do with that. So it's a very, very different way of thinking, rather than going, well, that's your fault because you haven't done your job. Yeah, and you get the mistrust and a blame culture then often comes around as well. So because collaboration isn't there. If everybody's collaborating all the time, in theory, there shouldn't be any mistakes.
Yes, absolutely. I think if you think of organisations as more of an ecosystem, if something isn't working, or you identify something isn't working, there's a danger that you remove that thing. And I'm going to use an analogy that may or may not make sense, because I'm kind of going with it as my brain works it through. But if you think of in nature, if you take away something that doesn't seem to be working, so for example, you have birds of prey eating the rodents. You think, oh no, the birds of prey are eating all the rats. Or all the mice. Let's go with mice. Mice are slightly nicer than rats. So you get rid of all of the birds of prey. You don't solve a problem. You just end up overrun with mice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a danger. I don't know where I'm going with it. I know where I'm going with the analogy. I'm just not sure I'm articulating it very well. But there's a danger that we almost sort of focus on one area without looking at potentially where other areas are going to overcompensate.
Mm-hmm. What you're saying absolutely does make sense, because essentially what you have in nature, since the beginning of time probably, is an ecosystem. And it takes a while for an ecosystem to develop and to balance as well. And if there's something serious that goes on and one of those species disappears, then there's an imbalance, and then it kind of rectifies it again. And within organizations, people are talking about ecosystems within organizations for a while, and that's the same as well. So you take a component out or you change it, then that ecosystem is out of balance, and therefore it's not going. So if you go back to a car plant as an example, if those tires aren't delivered on time, then there's something wrong in that ecosystem. So and the production can't carry on. The cars can't roll off the production line. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
But you need that collaboration, that broader view to be able to see where the problems are interacting with each other. Yeah. So when might collaboration not be a good idea then? I mean, there's going to be times when collaborating isn't the right thing to do, despite the fact that it sounds like a great idea. When might collaborating not be a good idea?
Oh, that's a tough question. I wasn't really expecting that one, because we kind of talk ourselves all the time, don't we, to think about that we should collaborate, but actually there are times when probably we shouldn't. So maybe in times, I was going to say in times of crisis, but often when we're in panic mode, we tend to not think broadly, and now we're thinking narrows, and often that is the time to collaborate. As you can see, what's happening in government and governments and supplies, now we're in time of crisis, it's very easy to hunker down in times of crisis and not collaborate. So that's kind of counterintuitive. I think I'm going to need some time to think about that.
Oh, I'll give you some time, and I'll go on to Pete then.
Thanks.
I think that's quite a challenging thought process to get my head around. One of the points that we were talking about with the process improvement, just a quick book recommendation, following black box thinking whilst we're expanding people's minds, is Eliyahu Goldratt, The Goal, which goes back to what you're talking about, the fluid process. So when you deal with one bottleneck, it creates a further bottleneck down the right way. And that's exactly what you were talking about with the birds of prey situation, that by fixing one problem, you move on to another. With regards sort of collaboration and not collaborating, I think that the time that I would really dissuade someone from going down a collaboration route is when you're not ready or it's not right, and the pieces don't align correctly to ensure that can happen with the right purpose, and certainly the values need to be aligned in what we're doing. So it's almost going back to when we're talking about leadership or development, and the role of the leader or the line manager when learning takes place. If they're not equipped and not informed of the value of what's happening, then someone can quickly become demotivated or disillusioned with whatever learning's taken place. They've not been supported back in the work environment, and that can then make that negative. And similarly, with that mindset around collaborating, if someone's not in the right headspace for it, it's going to be counterproductive.
Yeah, I think for me, it's about the times when it probably wouldn't be right is if there's not a clear and agreed outcome. So if you've got a whole load of different agencies involved in a collaboration, all with their own individual agenda, then I think a collaboration is completely the wrong way to go. I think there has to be, everybody's going to have their priority because they have their own function within that collaboration. So there's going to be potentially a risk of conflict, but conflict isn't always a bad thing. There's going to be a risk of conflict to be discussed. But I think as long as the overall outcome, the result that collaboration is working towards is aligned. Everybody has an understanding that, we talked in our first episode, and we talked about this a lot when we started this collaboration, is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think with any collaboration, the outcome has to be it has to be more important than the individual functions within that collaboration. So I think times when collaboration maybe shouldn't be the route you go down, or isn't necessarily the best route, is where there is one agenda that is maybe, so rather than it being a collaboration, really it's a sales, it's a sell. It's let's get together so you can do what I want you to do, as opposed to let's get together. Let's get together so that we can all create something bigger than all of us, where we work together. And I think, there are pitfalls to collaboration. There's always going to be power struggles. There's going to be egos in there. There's going to be potential conflict. And I think if you don't have that clear vision of what the outcome for that project is going to be, then there's a real danger that the project is going to fail, because you haven't got the buy-in and the drive from each of the agencies to make it work.
So I've had time to think now.
Oh, good. Good.
So I think my answer is a summary of what you both have said, I think. So first of all, it's the why, to use Simon Sinek's phrase. So always start with the why. So why are we doing this? Why am I doing this? So to kind of understand your level of motivation to do it. And I think there needs to be some impetus in it. There needs to be some kind of speed. Because if anybody's dithering around and going, oh, I'm not sure if this is right or not, well, it's probably not right for at least two parties in that collaboration. And trust as well, I think. And within trust is a common set of values as well. So if your values aren't aligned in any way, and I'm not necessarily talking about organizational values or individual businesses, but on a human level, or an individual level, I think values need to be aligned as well. Because I think if you haven't got those three bases covered, I think you're probably going to fail quite quickly, and possibly quite dramatically as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely important to get the fundamentals aligned to ensure that the collaboration works. That's the key thing: the vision and the goals and the objectives. Get those aligned. If any of those aren't there, then it must be back to the drawing board to review and to ensure that the parts that are coming together are the right parts as well. But one of the things I did want to point out is the massive opportunity that I would suggest for small business and for medium business to collaborate with each other. I think it is massively important. If we have got any small business owners who sort of tune in to listen, when you start out on that and embark on that journey for business or for your business, it feels quite insular, and you've got a vision of what you want to achieve, and actually it's quite easy to just see competitors all around you. And one of the most powerful things that I could suggest to anyone who's listening in that position is to really get out there and understand what other people do, because whilst there's always similarities in business between offerings, there's often actually an opportunity. There's an opportunity for collaboration, or there's something that you do that someone else doesn't do, and there's an opportunity for you to be able to expand your offering or to reach new people or create new opportunities for yourself through collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I wrote down initially the why would collaboration be a good thing was about finding balance for one thing, but also filling skills gaps or knowledge gaps, because nobody knows everything about everything, and there's always somebody who has the skills or knowledge that you need, and collaborating can bring that together and fill those gaps, if you like, in whatever the skill or the knowledge might be. Brilliant. We're nearly an hour. Do you know that?
That's great.
Talk for hours on this
subject. I could carry on, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
yeah, me too. Yeah, shall we carry on and then just cut it out that we didn't like so much?
Well, you might find, we might find that some of these topics they do have a huge amount. So what we could possibly do is do a bit of a series and cut them down and do them over a couple of days. So yeah, fantastic. Go on.
I had a few things before coming on the call. I wrote down some benefits of collaboration. I think this works, like Pete was saying, either whether you're a small business owner and you're a team of one, or a team of 10,000 in a business. So I think it's quite inspirational when you've got the right people or the right other organizations to collaborate with, because you get other people's motivation and energy. And sometimes, so whether you're self-employed and you're literally by yourself, or if you're a senior director working in your own office, and because of your job role, you're not interacting with people necessarily, both can be quite lonely. Very different scenarios, very different contexts, but both can be quite lonely places sometimes. You increase your network as well. I think it can be really educational, because again, it goes back, collaboration, you can learn, and you should learn through that, what you're good at, what you're not so good at, all the things we spoke about before. There's opportunity for sales, and all those kind of things, but it helps solve problems. And I think that's the key thing that we're talking about actually, is collaboration is there to solve a problem or problems, whatever that might be. And I think it should, when I collaborate with the people I really want to collaborate with, it's usually quite good fun as well. So it's quite motivating, because, collaboration should be fun, whether you're working with other small businesses or large businesses. And when I'm working with people, I see it as a collaboration, whether with you guys or with my own customers. I don't see myself being parachuted in, even if it is just for a one-day thing. I like to collaborate before, during, and afterwards as well. So you think, there are so many big businesses that collaborate so effectively. Spotify and Uber cars, as an example. Those are massive global brands, and they collaborate, and they've done very, very well at it. And both their brand values, I would imagine, have gone up.
Yeah, music and the arts is another great example, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When you hybridize two different genres, you almost create a new genre, and therefore a new audience. Whilst including both audiences that you had previously, it then opens up a new audience. And must I say, whilst having fun collaborating, it was quite enjoyable seeing your knee, Diff.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so do you know what? I am actually wearing shorts because it's summertime here in South Lincolnshire. So
the joy of Zoom. You only have to worry about the waist upwards, don't you?
I'm not going to stand up. Fortunately, I haven't got my pajamas on, because it's after lunch. No, I'm joking. And I was thinking about some other brands that collaborate really well. So, you've got, I was reading a James Bond book over the weekend, the original Casino Royale book. And I thought, Aston Martin and the James Bond franchise, there's such strong collaborations. And obviously, there's a reason why they do it, and it's because it works, and they probably both make a huge amount of money out of that. And it's interesting, if you look back to the James Bond franchise, the Aston Martin's there, and then sometimes it's not, and then it's there again. And there's also product placement and stuff in the James Bond films, like there are a lot of the large franchises. It's a collaboration that works. And then really differently then as well, a few years ago, A&E departments were working with Formula One as an example, because, just to get triage right. How quickly now these days you can get a Formula One car into the pits, get the tyres changed and everything else, and it is literally seconds now. So actually, A&E departments globally have learned from Formula One as an example to actually improve their processes. So sometimes collaboration doesn't come from likely pairs. It can be so very, very different organizations. So, but it does all the things we just said. It is inspiring, it is learning, it is about challenging yourselves as well. Because, working by yourself in your same organization, your same industry, you keep on doing the same thing over and over again. You get somebody in quite differently to collaborate with and go, actually, what you're doing, we can do that better. You can learn from us. And I think you have to be big enough, if you like, adult enough to accept that there is a different way of doing it, and collaboration is a really good way of doing that.
So I'll try that again. What attributes do you think, at the end of the day, when we talk about businesses and organizations collaborating, in reality, you've got people collaborating. Mm-hmm. You can stick the organizational title on it, but at the end of the day, it's people, it's human beings getting together in groups to make something happen. So what do you reckon are the key attributes necessary for a healthy and successful collaboration?
I think trust is the first one. That is such a big, important thing anyway, and so many people are talking about it now compared to a few years ago. So trust on a human level, not even on an organization level. I think that's quite key. I think within that, there's openness to be supported, because not all of us want help sometimes, but we might need it. openness to being challenged, openness to having feedback. I think you need to have a learning mindset as well. You need to be able to learn and challenge yourself and the status quo as well. As well as being willing to challenge other people, willing to give feedback, willing to help other people as well. It's definitely a two-way process.
Yeah. Pete?
So I would say shared benefit. So there's got to be something in it. Even if ultimately it might benefit one party more than the other, the party who's doing the supporting them, there must be a motivation for them to want to help that other party. And so you shared benefit and then a shared vision. So that needs to be aligned, and they're the key attributes for me that I think are massively important. And add to that from a human point of view, the openness, open-mindedness, emotional intelligence to be able to deal with the fact that it isn't just about you, and often we like to think it isn't just about us, but it's so easily said and not easily achieved. And emotional intelligence is something that we're always expanding our understanding of.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, there's got to be a level of vulnerability. You've got to be willing to be vulnerable, because, otherwise you get that kind of power, holding on to power and not sharing. And vulnerability, I think there's courage in vulnerability. You've got, it takes courage to admit that something maybe isn't working, or challenging why something's not working without apportioning blame. So I think vulnerability is one attribute I think that has to be there, which is difficult, and that means letting go of ego, which is always going to be difficult, but I think it can be achieved. And when you look at some of the best collaborations out there, they've worked because there's been that level of trust, that level of vulnerability. But I think the key attribute in any kind of collaboration is a willingness to communicate, and everything comes down to good communication, but the willingness to communicate effectively the good and the bad, and be honest about what's going on. And I think if you don't get that trust, good communication, willingness to let go of ego right, then you're going to end up at loggerheads. There's going to be a battle somewhere down the line, and it's not going to work. So we covered loads there, didn't we?
Whistle stop tour, that.
So, right, I'm going to put you guys on the spot now. What have you learned this week? We love learning. What have you learned this week? It can be as little or as big as you like.
Okay, I've actually had a good learning today, and I sent an email to a good friend and colleague, someone who I've known for a long period of time, and I sent him an email with a contractual agreement on there for some work that we're going to be doing. And even I thought that I had given enough preamble for him to understand why there was a contract involved. And the response I received was, it was measured. It was very measured in the response, but it was very much in disagreement, which I hadn't anticipated, and that showed me that even my communication skill had fallen short on that. So good learning point for me there. That was
brilliant. Dev.
Okay, so this week and next week, I've collaborated again with somebody, actually, who I've only ever met once, but we have a lot of connections, professional connections in common. And we are going to hold 2 webinars, essentially, for learning and development managers, heads of talent, and people like that, just to have a conversation about what does COVID mean for learning, for training, things like that in the future. And for people just to have that conversation like we're having about kind of chew the fat. There is no silver bullet at the moment. Nobody's been faced with this before. And I've been toying with the idea for a while. And it was literally just in a LinkedIn message, just a kind of, hi, how are you doing? Haven't seen you for a while. And I said, oh, and by the way, I'm doing this. Would you be interested in co-hosting with me? And he said, yes. I thought, that's great. And then I reflected, because I like to do that more than I've ever done before. And I thought, why have I never asked anybody else to do something like this? And is it just the current situation now that I've found the need to do that? And then I thought, and you get that kind of self-doubt sometimes. I thought, well, if I invite lots of people, how many will actually come? So then on Friday, I invited lots of people, and the first session on Wednesday is already full, and the second session on the 6th of May is already full. So the learning is, I think last time we mentioned about imposter syndrome a little bit as well. No matter how old you are, how professional you are, how big your network is, and all those kind of things, there's that some doubt sometimes in the back of your mind thinking, what if we ask and nobody comes? But if you don't ask, you don't get. So that's been my learning actually in the last week. Just go out and ask. And the worst that's going to happen is people are going to say no. So that's been my learning.
Brilliant. Well, mine's nowhere near as deep and insightful as yours. I learned that actually my son makes really good pizza dough. He makes brilliant pizzas.
Excellent. Can you send some around? 24
years old, and his repertoire is pizzas. But he spent an hour and a half with my granddaughter, who's 4. She's 5 next month, and the pair of them made pizza from scratch, literally kneading the dough. She thought it was brilliant. I don't know if you guys have ever made bread, but it's like wallpaper paste until it all comes together. And they were having a ball, and I discovered that actually they make good pizza. I don't even like pizza. Oh my God, they make good pizza. So they've got a job now every Monday forever. Mm-hmm. We'll have pizza. I see. Very, very shallow in my house.
Love pizza. So we're over yours for the next recording.
Well, that's not going to happen, is it? Social distancing. Plus, I don't share food.
No, I don't share food very well either.
Yeah. So
don't play well with others where pizza's concerned.
Yeah, that's only shallow unless you have a deep crust, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very good. Very good. Anyway, on that note, I think it must be time to go. We've got Mental Health Month coming up in May. Mm-hmm. So our next episode will be about mental health issues, and I think we're going to be looking at isolation and the risk of isolation and loneliness for employees and businesses and business owners, especially pertinent at this time, isn't it? So we'll look forward to that, and I think that's us done, guys.
Okay, cool. Speak soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good week. Thank you for joining us on the Stronger for Business podcast. Final thought before we go, in the words of Albert Einstein, education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. Have a great week. Join us next Friday for our next episode of the Stronger for Business podcast.